Hello everyone. I'm with my dad here today, Dr. Phil Pappas.
Hello.
Hello, Dad. And we're going to be talking about a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is ADD, ADHD, and learning disabilities,
And near and dear to me.
And near and dear to you too, because I was diagnosed with them when I was in the 4th grade, and my dad helped me to deal with them in a really safe and effective way. All these things that you taught me, I still use to this day. I just use them a little less because I've learned to kind of overcome them.
And I just remembered that when you're telling your story, that the reason I got into ADD and ADHD is because of you.
Oh, I inspired my dad, and
You
you
did.
inspired me. My dad was the director of a cutting-edge ADD program at a teaching hospital, and he's also a trained psychologist and a nutritionist. So our topic today, ADD, ADHD. Tell us, what is the definition of ADD and ADHD?
Okay, so I'm going to just read you a definition because I think it makes it simpler and easier, and we can elaborate on that. So attention deficit disorder or hyperattention disorder, ADD, ADHD, they're chronic conditions and they afflict millions of children. I'd say probably half the children are never diagnosed and can continue into adulthood. So ADD and ADHD is a combination of persistent problems like difficulty sustaining attention, in some cases hyperactivity, and impulsive behavior.
I'm sorry, were you saying something? No, I'm just kidding. The ADD, it kicks in sometimes.
Good one.
Can you describe the symptoms of ADD?
Okay, so there's a lot, so we'll kind of condense it, but you'll see a person that's disorganized, lack of focus, the ability to pay attention. They may they may vary off a topic while you're talking to them. They have trouble following rules, even in a social setting. They're forgetful. Where's my keys? Easily distracted. In the hyperactivity child, you can find fidgeting and squirming. They run and climb when they should be sitting. Inappropriate times they're doing, more aggressive activity. They may just seem inappropriately always moving. A lot of moving activity. And they may also be extremely and excessively talkative. Impulsivity can be a real issue, and if they're impulsive, they just do things inappropriately, and it makes them look like they're just not, quite there.
Yeah, I remember when I was little and the teacher would read us stories. She'd be like, "The chicken crossed the road, Lauren," and then I'd be like, "There's a character in the book named Lauren," and she kept saying like, "And then Billy went to school and he got an A on his paper, Lauren," and I'd be like, "What? Why does she keep saying my name? It's so weird." But it was just because I wasn't paying attention, and she was trying to get my attention, but I thought it was a character in the book. How is ADD and ADHD diagnosed?
Okay, it could be picked up by a pediatrician. It could be picked up by someone in school. It could be picked up by the parents. And very often they will go out and seek some type of testing by a behavioral specialist or an ADD center like what I was director of. They'll do a battery of tests. A lot of them are inventories. And actually today we have several computer tests that can diagnose ADD. And they will come up with a diagnosis. And some of those tests are very specific. We'll see distractibility, impulsivity, dyslexias, pick up on a lot of things. There are vision, you might go actually to a vision specialist if some of the problems seem like dyslexia, trouble reading. A good one to pick up on is losing your place while reading on the line.
Yeah.
Almost tells you there's a little bit of a visual problem.
I remember getting a slew of tests done when I was little, and actually being really relieved when I was diagnosed with learning disabilities, because then I knew what was wrong with me, and then you could come up with a solution to, the issue. What treatment options are available for those that have ADD and ADHD that are, diagnosed properly?
Well, let me run them down real quick and then we'll go back and pick up on them. There's drug treatment, and they use stimulants for that. And stimulants, we'll get into that in a little deeper, but why do we want to stimulate a child with ADD? we find that ADD children aren't quite awake. And their fidgeting and their activity like that is a way for them to kind of wake themselves up.
Right, which I find so interesting. I had no idea that was the case.
Well, it is, and never is explained properly.
I thought it was the opposite.
You give a child who's not quite awake a stimulant, and they wake up and they seem focused and more concentrated, under control. We know when we check the brain waves of a child that's awake compared to a child that doesn't have ADD, when it has ADD, one that doesn't, you'll see more sleep brain waves coming out in the ADD child and not so much in the non-ADD child.
Right.
So stimulant wakes that child up a little bit, they behave better. So we'll get into the drug thing a little more.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different therapies. One I like is rhythm therapy, and this is just a treatment. You might not even get near this. There are exercise therapies, which I've used with some of my patients. There are reading therapies. There's all kinds of things that you can use for ADD. There's biofeedback and neurofeedback, which I have done, hundreds and hundreds of therapies with kids using biofeedback and neurofeedback. This is done with computers now and can be very, very effective. And there's all kinds of studies that show that's the case. Then there's diet. Diet can be, if you don't get the diet, I don't know what
That's
you're doing.
the first thing.
We'll explain a little bit about that. I mean, there's lots of diets. You've probably heard of the Feingold diet.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated diet, but we'll get into that a little bit. And then there's supplement therapies. So we've had drugs for a long time. Nothing's changed. There's still stimulants. There's no improvement. We know how they work. There's side effects. Supplements, on the other hand, we've been using supplements. I've personally been using supplements for ADD since the late 90s. And there are more and more good supplements out there, a lot of improvements. The nice thing about supplements, whether they work or not, most of the time they do work. I never see a side effect, so it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. I've never had any side effects from any supplements that I've taken. I've taken them since I was young, and they've always been immensely helpful.
There's almost
safe.
Never a negative.
Yeah, and then back to talking about therapies. For me, my therapy since I was a teen, and still to this day, is exercise. So physical activity, and then also DJing, rhythm therapy.
There's your rhythm.
Rhythm therapy. Those are my therapies.
If I can say something about that rhythm, if you test a child's rhythm, a child that has ADD, very often you'll find their rhythm is way off.
Yeah.
So it's a way of noticing that, and you can train that.
Yeah, and I always disliked any sort of like organized sport because my coordination was always off. Or in gym class, when they were picking the teams, I was always like the last picked because everybody's like,
Rhythm plays a huge
not
role in
good
sports.
with the coordination. Yeah, but obviously I've overcome that or learned to work with it and find strengths in my so-called weaknesses.
Why don't we talk about the drug therapy and get that out of the way?
Yeah.
It's a little complicated. So drug therapy, stimulants, amphetamine type drugs. So they can make you focus, they can be effective. However, with that said, you're dealing with a lot of possible side effects. And they start with things like sleep problems. The person on the drug can't sleep, so they become more and more exhausted, more and more tired.
It's a snowball effect.
It is. There's a possible decrease in appetite, resulting in nutritional deficiency, particularly in a child. So you can actually have delayed growth.
Stunt the growth.
You could stunt their growth. There's headaches and stomach aches. You can have rebound when the drug wears off and they become extremely irritable. And you can't just give them another dose of the drug because then they're up all night. You can develop tics, these inappropriate sounds and behaviors that are a problem, particularly in the classroom.
Right.
Moodiness, irritability. It can get as bad as suicide. That's rare, but it's possible. You're giving a very small child a stimulant drug. It's kind of weird.
It's crazy.
They can have seizures. They can have increased blood pressure, and that goes right to the fact that we know there's heart damage from these stimulants later in life. if you've been on them for a long time. They may have a their heart rate may be increased as well as their blood pressure. They may develop a elevated body temperature. They may develop shakes and tremors. This gets kind of, where you almost can't give them the drug anymore. And then extreme agitation, and you got to take them off the drug at that point.
Right.
Then it gets even worse. You can have depression. You can have serious mood changes. You can have drug-seeking activities as they get older and teenagers.
Right, because they're dependent on it, and these drugs, they're no joke. They can become addictive.
They can, but
you can become dependent on
you're
them.
just basically putting a young child into that. You're telling them we can fix your problem with a drug.
Right. It's not a good way to. It's not a good example to set when your child's young. There are so many amazing options out there that are non-addictive and very safe. That we've talked about.
Yeah, no, we didn't talk about diet.
We didn't talk about diet, but diet is so critical.
It is.
And I swear by it. It is my everything. If you have a high sugar diet and you're getting your kids tons of carbohydrates and no nutrients, that is going to be a huge problem. That's the first thing that you need to fix before you even think about anything else. So a really great diet would be a higher fat, high protein diet.
Very low
low
carbohydrate,
carbs.
maybe 10% or less. There is the Feingold diet. It's very complicated. So I suggest to the parents that come to me and they say, what should my child eat? And I tell them 10% carbohydrates or less. The brain loves fat, especially for the child. It's the food that makes it, fat makes the brain healthy.
Yes.
So that's real important.
Yeah, and you notice a huge difference when you go from eating refined carbohydrates to eating a rich in fat or rich fat diet, how your brain functions and how your mood is enhanced and how your energy levels are
Fat is the
increased.
greatest thing for improvement of mood.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Bio feedback and neurofeedback, which is
Yep.
something that you did on me when I was little, and I really enjoyed it because it helped me to be aware and take control of my brain and become more conscious. So even when I was, in the classroom and I wasn't getting the biofeedback done, I just remembered the practices from that, and I was able to actually apply it.
The thing with biofeedback is you got to go to somebody who's trained in it. So it takes a little time, takes a little effort. There's practice at home. You got to be willing to do that. But if you do it, it actually works quite well. And from when I started in the 90s, things have evolved to be much, much better in biofeedback and neurofeedback. So the equipment's better, it's just much easier, and it's just really effective. So it's a good thing, but it's a cost. You have to find a therapist and that type of thing. Which leads us, I think, to supplements. What about supplement therapy?
Let's talk about supplements.
Well, I started looking at supplements, and there weren't many in the 90s. And I think all we had was a not great quality GABA. But I'll tell you what, it worked most of the time. You just had to give it in very high doses. Today, we've come a long way. We have a pharma-GABA that crosses the blood-brain barrier. We have a magnesium 3 that crosses the blood-brain barrier and helps with focus and calming. We have L-theanine, actually sun-theanine, does the same thing. It's just very, very effective. They work in the GABA neurotransmitter, and the GABA neurotransmitter is the inhibitory neurotransmitter. So you take behavior that's all over the place and you squeeze it down, and it becomes much more attractive, much more appropriate. Focus, attention, that's the GABA neurotransmitter. We go over to the fat side, that neurotransmitter is acetylcholine. And we have things, everything kind of springs from lecithin, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylinositol, and many others that you could use. The acetylcholine neurotransmitter is the performance neurotransmitter. You get the job done in that neurotransmitter. So you want to feed them both, unless you're doing fine in one neurotransmitter. But I kind of like to feed both of those neurotransmitters. Make sure that the acetylcholine neurotransmitter is that processing. How do I finish something?
Yeah.
Extremely, extremely important. So yes, there's lots of therapies, and in fact, you probably might mention that on our website, on earthfoods.us, you'll see there's an ADD
Section.
cognitive section,
Yeah.
and you'll see a lot of these products listed. Oh, by the way, now we have chewable GABA, we have chewable L-theanine. It's not quite as easy on the, well, actually, we recently, I might even have it on the website, we have a phosphatidylcholine in liquid and in spray.
Sublingual.
Yes, always better to use the capsule, I think. Kind of gives you more of it kind of grounds you. Lecithin comes in granules. I mean, there's so many things you could do to support this. And none of them are expensive.
Right. That's the beauty of it. I just took some chewable Pharma GABA this morning.
Oh, you did?
I feel amazing.
Yes. Yeah, the chewables are nice for kids that can't swallow.
Yeah, so there's something for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, something that we didn't discuss, but I think is really important, is it affects your self-esteem. When you have learning disabilities as a child, you get a lot of negative attention from your teachers, and sometimes, you know, the kids make fun of you, and it's really tough. So it's so important that the parent intervenes, because a lot of times the school can only do so much, or they don't understand what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a parent, or you are a parent, make sure that you dedicate as much time to taking care of this, so that your kids' self-esteem won't be affected, that they'll get positive attention, and they'll learn to cope with these disabilities and hopefully overcome them.
Child with ADD is constantly having their self-esteem challenged.
Yeah.
And it's up to the parent to pick that child up and
Yes.
and do what's necessary to get that self-esteem back to where it is.
And focus on the child's strengths and what they gravitate towards. You know, for me it was fitness, and for me it was music, and those are what built my self-esteem, because I was really good at them. School I wasn't good at. I still managed to graduate from college, but it wasn't easy, and I'm really proud of myself for doing it. But but in the end it was like having your help, and then having the things that I gravitated towards that got me through it, that were my therapy.
Well, I think you did a great job.
Thanks.
All right. Have we said what we want to say?
I think so. If you guys have any questions, please leave them below. All the supplements that we talked about, you can get them at www.earthfoods.
You can call the number at Earth Foods and leave a message, and I will get back to you.
Yeah, if you want to schedule a consultation with my dad, you can email or
You may just have a simple question. You can email it, but we get to everybody sooner or later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dad.
No, you're welcome.
Thanks for
Thank
helping
you.
me throughout my life, and thank you guys for watching.
And thank you.
Bye.
Bye.